Hello and welcome to The Right Idea, your guide to the policy, politics, and people that drive Texas. I'm Brian Phillips, the Chief Communications Officer at the Texas Public Policy Foundation, and with me always is my co-host, Derek Cohen. He runs our policy shop at TPPF as well. So you've got the comms guy, you got the policy guy, and we are in full session mode. But first I have to ask you, Derek, are your brackets busted? Like everyone else's.
Oh, I don't know. As long as nobody's going to go into the archives and look it up, I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't do a bracket.
How did your Cincinnati Bearcats do this year? Did they make it to the tournament?
They made it to a tournament. They got that going on. So, same with Michigan. So
the Hawaii Invitational or something?
Yeah. I was about to say, hey, don't sleep on Chaminade, No, all that to say is the brackets are in I think a state of disrepair would probably be a charitable estimate. Luckily, the pain seems to be felt specifically in my family group. The pain seems to be pretty universal.
Well, I actually like it when the brackets get busted because then you can just enjoy the games. You can just sit back and watch. And it's nice to have, our whatever, somebody's Texas Longhorns still in Sweet 16. So there's a lot of folks obviously around here that are excited to watch the game. So looking forward to that this weekend so we can just tear up the brackets. Nobody's going to win any money.
And we're not going to talk about what happened to the Aggies either.
Oh, yeah. We definitely don't want to talk about that. There's too many Aggies in the building. So we will just move on from the sports world. We will talk about politics. We will talk about policy. Obviously, we are in the thick of things here during session. A couple of housekeeping notes. If you want to give us feedback, we always love that online, good or bad. I'm at Real Bphil on Twitter, and Derek is at Cohen at TPPF, if I get that right, on Twitter. We love, ideas for the show or policies and topics that you guys want to talk about. But, this is, we talk about this every week. We talk about this, feels like we talk about it, often because it's the top 2 or 3 issues. We'll just jump right into your Lege-Land report on what's going on in session right now. School choice right now, as we speak, is still going on in the Senate Education Committee. What's going on at the Capitol? Yeah,
well, it's funny you mentioned that we're in the thick of it because on Tuesday that was the halfway line. So we got all everything that has gone before. Now we get to do it again. But the funny thing is, work distribution wise, we're probably only about, I would say, 30% of the way done work wise. Just because how the next several weeks, several months are going to be loaded. So you mentioned school choice. That was a big hearing yesterday. We saw on the north steps of the Capitol hundreds of folks showing up in the rain, no less, to support Governor Abbott and his push for school choice. Obviously, then driving down to Houston and having a similar rally for that. Obviously, that was last week. We had the Houston ISD Day at the Capitol, so we talked a little bit about that as well. But also on the days at the Capitol thing, that's one of the things I found pretty entertaining. Is that it seems like this week they're packing all the so-and-so day at the Capitol, blank county day at the Capitol, all that
Realtors Day yesterday.
Oh, yeah, and my goodness, they were out in force. I made the flip joke, like, quick millennials, buy a house now and save 4%. So, but all joking aside, it's just the Capitol is at that peak buzz right now. Because, of course, when you get closer to sine die, bills start to die, certain constituencies stop showing up for certain reasons. And that's kind of the circle of life, as it were.
And organizations start to wonder why they paid all that money for lobbyists when the bills are dying and they're not moving on the calendar and all of that. Well, let's jump into what we saw this week. Let's start with school choice. I mean, there was the committee hearing yesterday. What was your takeaway from I guess it was a debate. I mean, we heard a lot of witness testimony. It's kind of the way it works at the state capitol is that they have folks that they invite because they want specifically to hear from them, and those folks always go first. But then it's a free for all after that. Anybody can go in and give their 2 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever what have you. Where did you see the debate going during that discussion?
Well, I mean, no doubt I think they said they had some like 320 some odd witnesses, and each one getting 3 minutes to talk that's going to take quite some time. I don't do math in public though. That being said, is what we saw the debate going. And keep in mind, it wasn't just SB 8 being SB 8 and SB 9 being up. There was other ones in that lane.
And SB 8 is the chairman's bill on ESAs or school choice, and then SB 9 is the teacher pay. Just so everybody knows.
Yeah. And so those are obviously moving together for very, very clear reasons. The issues that we saw being brought up was less about the form and function that these programs would take, but it was more about this whole. I don't want to say narrative for narrative's sake, but it's you can definitely tell when somebody shows up without having read the bill or at least having a functional understanding of what's in it. And a bill like SB 8 is not a small bill by any means in terms of both scope and even page count. But that being said, is that the major tenets of what a bill does are what animates it. But what we saw, especially a lot in the public setting, is that, or the public testimony, is that not a lot of folks knew what was inside the bill. They decried vouchers and stuff like that, but that's the rallying cry and all that.
Sure.
But they did so in ways that, with things that weren't in the bill, they did, of course, following wild speculation about, rural high schools exploding and football poofing out of existence in Texas, which that would be quite the feat in of itself. We heard those particular stories, but the thing is, it was never countered, or at least counterbalanced by the people that were expositing them, from the folks that were saying, like, no, I'm in this school right now and it's horrible and I am locked in and there's nothing I can do. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, you've heard some back and forth. You heard some folks on the committee saying, "Oh, this won't even cover the average cost of a private school," and it's like this. That's not the point of this. The point is give them a fighting chance. There are people that are sacrificing working 2 jobs so that their kids can go to private school. Now, one of the points that were raised about that is that those kids, if they're already in private school, won't necessarily benefit from the ESA provision of SB 8. Right. That's a policy debate that they're having. But there's a million other things in SB 8 that improve the quality of education. We talked about the 4-tier model of how education is supposed to work here. This does that. Mm-hmm. This does that. So even if this does not facilitate your child going to a different school, which goes a really long way to doing that, even if it doesn't, it has many other features that would actually strengthen education.
Right, and that's the Parents' Bill of Rights part that the governor's been talking about, and that folks up there have been talking about. Certainly something that TPPF has been talking about, this idea that if you read the bill, it's all right there in plain English. You have a right there. You have transparency. You have a right as a parent to know what your kids are going to be learning. What are the materials that they're going to be learning? And you shouldn't have to. It shouldn't take 6 months and levels of bureaucracy in order for them to give you those materials. If they're giving them to your kid on Monday, you should be able to access that and know what they are and know what those things are.
And that's actually a good jumping off point for another interesting hearing that we saw this week with Jared Patterson's HB 900, the Reader Act. Mm-hmm.
And this is the bill dealing with inappropriate materials, adult materials, highly sexualized materials that are available to children in schools.
Yes. And you saw that one, again, following the same similar trajectory where folks were coming in and testifying, usually part of an interest group, like, say, the Texas Library Association, about that. And I mean, interest groups are interest groups. Technically we are as well. We advertise very strongly what our animating principles are. But again, it was just kind of coming in, and then this kind of like superficial battling of why are you trying to burn books? Mm-hmm. Why are you trying to
ban books?
Yeah, make this Fahrenheit 451. It's like, no, you just want some sort of controls. And again, this doesn't even necessarily go through and start throwing books in the dumpster. This creates a process for review, and so that's one of the things where. It seems that
which I think a lot of parents would be shocked to even know that it's that light. I mean, it's a great bill, and obviously, we've said it's a good bill, and it'll have a lot of improvement. But I mean, to your point, it's not even. It really doesn't come close to banning books. It simply says there's a process for review, and that parents have, again, back to parents' rights. Mm. Parents have a large say in if they don't like something that's in their kid's classroom or in their kid's library, that they are part of this process, and they don't have to, again, spend 6 months and, miss work and do all kinds of things in order to get, this pornography out of their libraries.
Yeah, and one of the I will say one of the testimonies against the bill that I actually found somewhat compelling was saying, like, some of these books, offer an escape or or some form of a normalization for somebody who's going through, things that were trauma specifically. What if it was sexual trauma, things like that? And I actually resonate with that. But the thing is, if you look at what would fall in that camp, many of those books would be fine. These absolute explicit descriptions of some of these sexual acts, aren't necessarily ones that will provide that holistic, quasi therapy for these kids. So, and not only that, but with a review process in place, that is going to be something that will actually be able to be independently evaluated.
And look, I would be, I've said this multiple times in the program and other places. I wish they would just have an intellectually honest debate about what it is that they want. Right. I mean, that seems to me like if that's a legitimate concern with people, just to have that part of the debate and say, look, this is what we're concerned about. This is why this material is available. It's kind of a, it's a kind of a red flag for some, for people who then can help the child and get them the counseling that they need. I mean, obviously, we don't think that if somebody's been sexually traumatized, they need to be sitting alone in a library reading this book, and that's all that we need to do and help them as a society. But this might be, if you're making an intellectually honest case for why this material needs to be in there, that's fine. I will hear you out, and but that's not what they do. I mean, that's not what the left does. I mean, the members in the House yesterday, tweeting out, using social media, talking about banning books, and that's not what the debate is about. It's not remotely what the debate is about, because they either don't have the intellectual heft to come up with good arguments for why that stuff is in there, or they just believe what we think they believe, and they think kids need to be exposed, 13-year-olds need to be exposed to this kind of graphic sexual material, and they think it's a good thing just in general, which is, of course, what parents are so crazy about.
I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and say maybe it's all just rhetorical flourish. But again, we talked last week on, what was it, HB 20 dropped. That's the border security bill in the House, which I not only read myself, I had to have our policy folks at work on that draw up a BA on that, because I was like, there's no way that this is a lynching bill or what.
Right.
And I get it. And you go and you read it. It's like, this is absolutely insane. This has nothing to do with any of that stuff. And it comes to a thing where, like, either this is such a cynical, craven take on what this actual bill does, or like you said, or they actually believe it, which I don't believe anybody could be, working in an adult profession and have that level of take. But it's funny because you see this, and this is why we see, like as was reported in the Dallas Morning News, that the Democrats are going to try to either pop the budget, walk out on the budget, or what else did you see that they're going to put leverage on casino gambling in Texas? Yeah, I was about to say, if
good luck.
Yeah, so you're a political guy, or at least a person with political sensibilities. You understand that saying, yeah, we were going to give you property tax relief, but instead we're going to we're going to hold the budget up because we feel that kids should be able to go undergo surgeries,
gender modification surgeries. Yeah, I mean, and that's the other thing. Back to that point. I mean, whether it's HB 20 and the immigration border security issue, and them framing it as, oh, well, this means that this police force is going to kick down grandma's door and deport her, which of course is not the case. Or you have the drag queen bill, I think, which is the getting the drag queen shows
up so as we speak.
Yeah, is up today, and making sure that minors can't attend these highly sexualized shows. Oh, well, that's anti-gay. It's like they just have to frame it in these intellectually dishonest ways.
The best one I saw was from the Austin LGBTQIA plus Chamber of Commerce.
Wow.
You want to talk about taxpayer-funded lobbying? But they said that under this, you would not be able to show Mrs. Doubtfire. I mean, I've seen Mrs. Doubtfire several times. I must have missed the part where, as said in the bill, it's for an explicit prurient sexual interest.
Right. I definitely didn't see.
Maybe
that.
I was just not watching it the right way.
I did not see that. That must have been in the director's cut. I don't know of Mrs. Doubtfire. But like Greater Tuna. These are characters. These are actors playing a character. Playing his grandma or playing playing Mrs. Doubtfire. Like, these are actors playing a part. That has nothing. It's not simply men dressing up as women. Like, that's not the part. I mean, you see these videos of these scantily clad men dressed up like highly sexualized caricatures of women, walking kids down the runway and shaking their rear ends in front of them, and then having them handed dollars. Like, I don't remember that in Mrs. Doubtfire. I don't think that was a scene in Mrs. Doubtfire.
To be fair, it's been at least 15 years since I've seen it.
We'll have to go back and watch that one. Rest in peace. I just
Robin Williams.
Robin Williams. Thank you. Yeah, one of the greatest actors. All right, so well, let's get into it. I mean, people don't just listen to this for our punditry on all things. What's coming up? So we have, property tax is a huge one. That one just got to the Senate floor. It got out of committee. Where are we at on property tax?
I believe they voted out Senate Bill 3 yesterday, if I recall correctly. Now, obviously, a lot of attention was paid towards Senate Senate Education. But yeah, so again, to shout out your product there, Brian, the layout. We just posted one, I believe, this morning with James Quintero talking to Senator Paul Bettencourt and Senator Tam Parker on SB 3, 4, and 5. Now, I had to actually print out the chart because it's a pretty complex 3-tier system that they're working with here.
I follow this stuff, and I have to ask all you smart people to please dumb it down.
Is there somebody behind me? Or?
Yeah, I know. And Paul Bettencourt does a really good, Senator Bettencourt, does a really good job of kind of breaking this down. And he's on, I hear him on the radio and stuff. And even then, I still have to run it back and try and follow along to see, what does this mean? How's this going to actually affect my property tax? Right.
And so and again, we've talked a little bit in previous episodes, not in a previous episode, but previous episodes about the differing approach between the Senate and the House, and also where we have invitations out. We want to have the authors of the House approach come in as well, talk to James, and kind of walk through their rationale, their ideas here. Because again, I think everyone's kind of in the same. If we're quote unquote insiders and we're still kind of trying to parse the difference between which one of these is an A or which one of these is 1 and which one is 1A. We're still trying to work our way through that. I think we can see that, at least the broad strokes of what these are coming to fruition. So obviously with SB 3, that's the one that deals mostly with the homestead exemption, and it obviously increases that for the over 65s as well. SB 4 is the compression side, and then the business taxes are taken care of in SB 5. So there's a broad base, different, I think different relief functions and amounts in different buckets there, but that's essentially trying to, help everybody out in one way, shape, or form. And again, we're going to, I love to have the authors from the House side on, because their approach is compelling as well. And I think that once you hear the layout, you'll be able to start discerning the differences.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, well, we have a series. If you're not familiar with it, it's called The Layout. It's on our YouTube page. It's got its own playlist there. We have more than a dozen members that we've brought in to talk specifically. It's 5 to 7 minutes. They talk about the bills. They talk about what the problem is that they're trying to solve, how the bill would work. They get into the kind of the nitty gritty and the nerdy stuff. And it really it's not just property tax and school choice and things like that everybody's talking about. It's a lot of these bills that are really, really important that don't really get the media because they're not as sexy, and the media can't, demonize the conservatives with it. But these are really important bills that are up, and so we created a series where the members can come in and without being poked at, they can basically lay out their bills.
Yeah, and you said that it's a. It's not necessarily the banner issues all the time, even though many of the ones that we've had are for some major priority legislation, whether in the House or the Senate. I think that one of my favorites might be Representative Schaefer's one on workforce development, one that you hosted.
Yeah, one that I hosted. Workforce development.
And so, and again, that's nobody's out there marching for quality job-based funding models in higher education.
Right.
But it's such an important thing to the health of the state that, it would be foolish not to engage in it. I'm just glad that we have a venue where we can start getting that information out there.
So that was the shameless plug portion of the podcast. We probably spent too much time on that, but it is a great series, and frankly, it's doing its job. I mean, people are watching it and they are learning about these bills, and frankly, members are enjoying the opportunity to come in and talk about their bills that they don't normally get to talk about. But you did mention higher ed, and that's a big one that's going on. The same committee that was debating school choice yesterday, and the Senate is debating higher ed. One of the big issues there, again, it's one of these issues that's not super sexy, but actually really, really matters, particularly to parents, is this idea of accreditation. And not a lot of people know how this has gotten off track, but I'll just give you the bumper sticker version. You know, parents used to use the accreditation process to know which universities were actually doing their job, which universities were actually preparing kids to go on and, you know, get into the workforce and giving them a well-rounded education and, you know, discovery and learning and all the things that higher ed is supposed to do. These accreditation services, which are private services, which are deemed the authority, given authority by the federal government to accredit universities. This was kind of a cliff notes for parents, right? To be able to say, this university is accredited, this one's not, so I'm spending my money wisely over here. Jump to today, not surprisingly, a lot of these accreditations services have now gone woke, and instead of just simply validating and verifying that these are good, worthy academic institutions, are now using their power to accredit in order to force social change or faculty changes or approach to hiring, using their authority with being able to accredit or not accredit a university to push more of this woke ideology. And so that is happening, unfortunately, across the country. The accreditation services are really taking it on the chin right now because all this is getting exposed. And Texas, as usual, is really leading in this effort to reform this whole system to make sure that parents, and it really boils down to parents, so that parents can know that when they're sending their kid to some university or college, that the accrediting actually means something about academics and not just social justice.
Absolutely. And so I came from academia, and I will be the first to tell you, I tell this to people all the time, is that what you think it is like, it was worse than that when I left. And that was
years ago. Yeah.
10 years ago.
10 years ago.
10 years ago. And the funny thing is, it's like I went to a, fairly blue collar Midwestern school. I went to the University of Cincinnati. And, that's not Sarah Lawrence. That's not Brown. That's not Vassar.
Yeah, right.
And
Brandeis,
and like so many of these, but so many of those institutions are so far gone. They were farther down the road, but even Cincinnati, had all sorts of interesting interference with our, with kind of the student conduct board when it started to drift that way and in favor of what we now essentially see is kind of the corruption of the certain restorative justice models versus what it originally was. Mm-hmm. And so that's what it was. Where it is now, I can only imagine. But the reason it gets like that, again, you mentioned the accreditors, but on the actual university side, it's the same thing. On the university side, I think they just said the University of Michigan, another one of my alma maters, has some like over 100 DEI professionals, which. Yeah. Even if you have a DI department with 5 individuals, if you need a full some universities don't have 135 faculty.
Yeah, right.
Smaller universities don't have that, and yet we have this many people dedicated to
just working on DEI, which is, of course, the enforcement mechanism for all this woke garbage.
I would challenge them to demonstrate what those people are doing with their time, what they're doing with the tax dollars.
Well, there was a Wall Street Journal article about how a lot of those folks were getting fired because of that exact reason, like because of the economy, because of cutbacks, the universities are having to try to find savings in places, and they're realizing that one of the biggest savings was, they hired all these high-priced DEI consultants, and they're not getting any bang for their buck. There are 2 examples that I'll show.
They're getting a less palatable product for us. What they're
doing. Exactly. I mean, that's what there was a report out of the Texas A&M, whoop Aggies, whatever. Did I do that right?
I think whooping Aggies was what happened in the tournament.
Exactly. Look at you. No. Do we have a little bump?
No, I was about to say, my bad. It's to the point where I'm just sharing pain. It's cathartic.
But they did, for their part, they did put out a report that said people, like, after implementing these DEI policies or implementing, or creating a DEI department and hiring all these people to enforce all this stuff, people are less happy, or people feel less included. People, they asked the question, do you feel included and part of, the system and part of the community at Texas A&M? Whatever it was 5 or 7 years ago, 85% of students said yes. Today it was 55%. That is a huge jump in just a short time, even after they have implemented all these crazy DEI policies.
Yeah, and I can and that with an example just down the street at the University of Texas. They had some sponsored research pursuant to COVID, and a lot of this is publishing forthcoming, but a lot of what they found is, again, because looking at the mental health of individuals, how did it persist or change through the COVID experience, and people are, I say people, students are terrified of saying the wrong thing. They are at a place where it is actually mentally unhealthy to engage in any sort of debate. So when we talk about,
I was gonna say, that's a feature, not a bug.
Yeah, exactly.
Of DEI.
Well, how else are you going to say that words are violence?
Right.
You'd have to believe that not only can words hurt, but that they can do so in such a way that they need to be preemptively stopped. Now, of course, that's anathema to literally everything this country is built upon, but still, hasn't stopped them yet.
Which is interesting because the universities are fighting back, or some universities are fighting back by creating entire colleges, the purpose of which is getting back to free speech, or getting back to to values that aren't so far left. And so you have, I think they called it at one point the Liberty Institute at the University of Texas. I think it's now called Civitas. But they're establishing something up there. Of course, the faculty is losing their mind because they call it, this is just some MAGA, right wing thing. Actually, it's all about free speech.
Yeah, I would say don't comment on the fact that they have a 30-person Center for Abortion Advocacy, but that's a whole other thing.
Well, and going back to the accreditors, there is a case out at the University of North Carolina where they have done something similar. They have created an entire college, the purpose of which is to foster free speech and free debate and a diversity of viewpoint, actually, and to have different ideas about different subjects, and to have an entire college. Never mind that the whole college should probably be like that, no matter where they are. But they're having to create this college. Well, the accreditor for UNC got involved and said, "Well, you didn't run this past the faculty." Of course, the faculty is completely woke, dyed in the wool, and they're saying, "Oh, well, this is wrong. You didn't run this past the faculty." Like, why is the accreditor getting involved in that? Like, what is the role of the accreditor to say, here's your process for creating a new college, and you have to do X, Y, and Z. Otherwise, that has nothing to do with academic credentials. It has nothing to do with, with research and stuff that they're putting out. It has to do with the process of creating a new college. And yet that accreditor is trying to get involved and saying, well, you didn't give the veto power to these woke faculty before you did that.
You're not letting the inmates run a particular front door to the 100%. Asylum.
Yeah, 100%. All right. Okay. So we talked about a lot this week. That's literally going on right now as we speak, is that debate over accreditation. So I wanted to highlight that. There are probably other things that we wanted to highlight from this week, but I do want to get your take while we still have 5 or 10 minutes to go on what's next. A lot of these bills are just getting through committees, and the bills are once the bills are, I guess, amended and they're substituted. It's called a substitute whenever they add things to the bills. They're getting out of committee. Now they're heading to the floor. We're kind of in that process right now. So what do you see coming up in the next couple of weeks?
Well, some of that's already, some of those ships have already sailed. I believe the Senate, I'd have to check to see how many bills they've actually voted out that are now received in the House. We talked earlier about the compliment to Senator Cornyn's gun bill, the one that gets disqualifying information into NICS if it was generated in a juvenile context. Mm-hmm. But also another big one, and another one carried by Chairwoman Huffman, was the joint resolution that allows judges to actually deny bail in very serious cases. We talked about before, you can only deny, basically, unless a cop walks in with you with a smoking gun or that you have a rap sheet a mile long, you are owed an amount of bail, and I just have to guess how poor you are, so that you don't pay it. And then if you find somebody that can back you on that, then you're gone. Mm-hmm. And so that's obviously not making the public safety determination.
So they can deny this. It's loosening the rules behind being able to deny bail to particularly offensive.
Yes.
criminals.
Yeah. And let me, and like, I know like a lot of people, oh, that's probably just those conservatives in the Senate running it down the liberals' throats. It was a 30-1 vote.
Yeah.
30-1. 30 senators out of 31 thought, no, having this tool in the toolbox is something useful. That's already over in the House. The House is already meeting with all its committees. They're already kicking stuff out. They haven't set a calendar yet, but I think we're going to see the first one here very shortly.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about the Senate, and they can, they run differently, so they can literally move quicker. There was only 31, as you mentioned, so not everybody. You don't have 150 members trying to clamor, and get their word in, which is the way it should be. Yeah. But it does move a lot faster in the Senate. So where are we in the House with, say, Senator Betancourt was bragging today, which he should. His 4 bills got voted out of the Senate unanimously. All 4 bills. It was, he was 124-1 to 0. So all of those go to the House. Kind of, how does that process take place, and what's the timing?
Well, if you look online on let's just say SB3 or what have you, if you look online, it'll say received by the House. So now what happens is it needs to be referred. Now, one thing that can happen is that it doesn't necessarily get referred.
Referred to a committee.
Referred to a committee, yes.
Okay.
Or they can wait till whatever the House now for SB3 is a bad example of this because there is no House analog of that. Again, because the House has a different approach to how they want to tackle the property tax issue. But let's just say that there was an SB3 in the House, HB3. Okay, just that's not a real number. Actually, HB3 is another funding bill, but it's for school safety. Right. Chairman Burrows, which is actually a really good bill. All that to say is, let's say
there was a counterpart to it in like a 1-to-1 match.
Yeah, let's say it was a House bill. They could actually pass the House bill through the committee, lay out the Senate bill, or set it to a calendar, and then on items eligible, lay out the Senate bill. So in that case, the Senate bill technically would not have been voted on in that committee, but since it's the same, substantive content, they could vote that out. Now, if there was any change, then I don't want to go too far in the weeds, but if there was any change.
That's what we do here. We get in the weeds. It's all good. That's why we have this program.
Buckle up. You ready for some nerd stuff? Yeah. But what they would do is, let's just say that they do move, or like they say, okay, we are going to do the Senate bill model. They do move Senate Bill 3 through the committee. They change it. They go, okay, but I want it to reflect, you'd have to do a separate bill for this, but let's just say they put valuation caps in there somehow. It wouldn't be germane, but let's just suppose they did that. And then that gets through the floor, gets voted out and sent back. So now we have SB3 that got voted out of the Senate and SB3 that got voted out of the House. 2 radically different bills. What do we do then? So that's what it'll go to then, the originating chamber, and they will have to vote whether to concur with it or to confer with it. So in other words, if they concur with it, they go, those changes are fine. Let's send it to the governor. If they want to go to a conference committee, then they pick 5. It's usually the bill author and their 4 closest friends. And then the House picks 5, and then they come together and they negotiate that. And then they have to vote to adopt the conference report, so that, again, is the final vote on that bill in that chamber.
So the conference board goes all back to the House and the Senate. Yeah. If they both vote for it, then
those will be identical. And they both have to approve it one final time.
Okay. So obviously a lot of controversial big bills going on in the Senate that we've talked about. What's going on in the House? What are the big issues that are going on in the House?
I got to say, and not only because I think that we've seen a lot of great leadership on this, but some of our folks have been really helpful on it too. I think the tech agenda is looking really, really good in the House. So we had issues,
and this is protecting kids online. This is
data
privacy, broadband issues. All of that is looking good.
And yeah, the broadband bill. That's something that we'll have to pick up, because it's a broad bill, so to speak. So that's something that needs to be analyzed. But on the matters of data privacy, HB4, keeping kids safe online, HB18, we essentially have seen those not only been given a hearing. HB4 will probably be one of the first ones set to a floor debate. And we've seen it was a very, very positive hearing on on those bills. Maybe some interested parties might not have thought it was as positive. But that being said, is the speaker's tech agenda is
like the social media companies who are going to have to regulate or be forced to regulate some of their content.
But that being said, is we generally see that the interest in getting those bills moving is pretty pronounced. And one thing I will also say, and where I think that the process is going to seem artificially slow, even though it's not, is the speaker made a select committee on community safety. And so that is kind of like an adjunct to the Homeland Security and Public Safety Committee. Both are chaired by Chairman Guillen. And so we're going to see them handle a lot of the really tough bills, the Uvalde-oriented bills, the bills dealing with gun control or gun rights. And so those have very complex discussions. There's a lot of people that want to speak their mind on that, and they split it apart into two committees. That's going to make it seem like a whole lot more process than necessary. Yeah. The other side of that would be keep them in the same committee and have hearings go till 10 a.m. the next morning.
As big of an issue as that is, as tragic as Uvalde was, it is true. You haven't really heard much about the reforms on that, but there will be a major debate on that. I mean, the folks that we talk to up there, have always asked for ideas, coming up with good reforms that, both keep kids safe, keep the schools safe, but there's some controversial ideas, getting, guns on campus and having, former cops be able to, carry on campuses and things like that. So it hasn't really bubbled up quite yet because of all these other property tax and things issues, but it's coming.
You make a really good point. It's the sobriety of the debate right now, and I think that is
which is encouraging, right?
Yeah, because this is obviously a very serious matter, and in doing so, you do have a couple members in either chamber who are making it about them. You needn't look too far to figure out who that is. But the folks that are actually in the
name names, come on.
I got to go and talk to them after this, man. But no, I think that you are seeing a lot of folks having an earnest, sober, good faith discussion. And does that mean it's going to end to agreement? Absolutely not. But the fact that it is keeping this civil, respectful tone in and of itself is good. I think we're going to see a lot of good work with Chairman Burrows' bill on school. Chairman Ken King has a bill on that as well, and obviously Tracy King has several. Who represents Uvalde has several bills in that space as well, and they're all going to be discussed.
All right. Well, that's a positive note. I think we can probably close on that as well. So it's getting very interesting in the Texas Legislature. Things are literally happening right now as we speak. We're going to leave here and go and check our email and text and all of that, Twitter, to find out what we missed. And so we really do appreciate those of you who are listening every week. We're getting a lot of really good feedback. Again, you can get Derek and I on our various social media avenues and platforms. Usually on Twitter. Derek is as well. And then, of course, any of this information is all available at texaspolicy.com. If you want to find the layout, which is the new product that we talked about, you can just go to texaspolicy.com/layout, the layout, and it'll take you right to all of the episodes. If you have a bill that you want someone to come in and talk about, and it could be Republican, Democrat, Conservative, it may not be something that we even necessarily support. We would love to have a member come in and talk about bad bills, right? Like that could even be a thing. So if you have ideas about what we could do there, we would love to hear from you and get your feedback. So as always, I've been saying it wrong. The quote that I love from Sam Houston, I've been saying do good and suffer the consequences. It's actually do good and risk the consequences, which I think is actually probably better.
Yeah, it's better because it's like, oh yeah, you're going to suffer.
Exactly.
It's like, oh, you may.
All right. Well, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. As always, do good and risk the consequences. We'll see you next time.